Welcome. You're watching The Moody Lawyer. Justice served with experience and integrity.
Hello and welcome to The Moody Lawyer with attorney Josh Moody. With a rich background in law enforcement and a comprehensive legal career spanning criminal justice, personal injury, and civil matters, Josh offers a unique perspective on navigating the complexities of the legal system. I'm at the Mac, and today we're talking about what happens when the driver who you hit doesn't have enough insurance. This is uninsured and underinsured motorist claims, protecting yourself when the other driver has no coverage. Josh, sir, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's start with this. Can you explain what underinsured motorist and underinsured motorist coverage means in the state of California?
Sure. It's probably one of the most misunderstood areas in insurance law that the average person doesn't understand and doesn't know because they rarely have to deal with it. Let's start with, so uninsured motorist is probably the most simple concept that people understand. Somebody hits you, they're at fault, they don't have insurance. We live in California, and the number of uninsured motorist claims since I started over 10 years ago has just gotten more and more and more. It's continually going up. There are people who just don't pay for insurance. So that's a pretty easy concept to understand. And what you pay for when you deal with your insurance company every year, they will try to sell you uninsured motorist, which means if there is an accident, your insurance company will cover you as if the other person had insurance. The second is underinsured motorist. This is where it gets a little tricky and people don't understand. So an underinsured motorist is someone who maybe has the minimum, a year ago it was the minimum 15 policy, now it's 25, but they would have some insurance, but not enough to cover your damages or your bill. So this is somebody with maybe a 15 policy and they caused you $50,000 in damages. And then on top of that, pain and suffering or what have you. But let's just say that your bills are $50,000. So they're going to give you the 15, but you still have 35. Is that right? Do my math right. You still have 35 to go to pay the bill. So that's what underinsured motorist does. So you can get insurance to cover when there are people who have the minimum insurance or just not enough insurance to cover you. So that's the difference between the two, and they are key. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between the two.
I think this one lady that hit us when we were in LA, I think she was underinsured, because I remember it being like the worst. You know what I mean? As far as the coverage goes, I remember it not covering barely anything. And we were really in a tight spot because she smashed the whole front end of our car when we were parked. It was awful.
And that's unfortunate, and that does happen. And it just kind of makes sense. People who have a lot of assets, people who drive nice cars, people who have houses, they tend not to, drive as recklessly as others. And, there are still car accidents with people with lots of insurance, but a lot of the people who don't have insurance, don't have driver's license, don't have registration, they get a car at an impound or something and they just don't register it. They have nothing to lose. So it kind of makes sense that a lot of our bad drivers on the road are people who are underinsured. They have the minimum that are required. And you can still have a 15 you can be grandfathered into the 15 policy. So $15,000 today, that's an ER visit. That's a visit to the emergency room. That's about it. So I always tell people who come in, you have to insure yourself, assuming that the other person is not going to have insurance, because you have to deal with the worst case scenario.
How common is it in high desert to get into a crash with someone who either has no insurance or just the bare minimum, as far as maybe percentage goes of people?
It's very common. Like I said, it kind of makes sense too that the majority of people who are out there causing crashes are the people who are reckless. And a lot of these, speed is the major factor. Speed is probably the number one factor of all accidents, I believe, and then after that, stop signs, pulling out into traffic, those are very common. So as far as definitely the majority are uninsured or minimally insured, for sure.
So Josh, if someone is hit by an uninsured driver, what should they do right away to protect their ability to make that claim?
So and that's why when you come into an attorney's office, we deal with how you get to the uninsured motorist, because them just simply saying, I don't have insurance doesn't mean it's not out there. So what you do is you come in, you just treat it like any other case. You get the police report, you determine fault. So for this example, like you said, in your example, they ran into you, they either rear-ended you or smashed you, and then there's a lot of damage. You still you send notice to, if they say that they used to have insurance, or you send notice to those insurance companies that they say they either used to be a part of, just to make sure there's no policy out there.
Oh.
Then what you're required to do is fill out a declaration to the DMV. We take care of that for our clients, and then we submit it to the DMV, and then we get what's called an uninsured motorist certificate. And the DMV will say, in our database, we cannot find any insurance for this car or for this person. And then you can make a claim with your insurance company when they accept that certificate.
Wow. So many drivers assume their own insurance will automatically cover them. What should people know about the limits and protections of, the underinsured and coverage in California?
That's a good question. And I think I've used this example before on our podcast, but in order to get to your underinsured motorist, you have to exhaust the other person's policy. So in our example, let's say the person who ran into you and causes, let's say $50,000 worth of damage, and they have a 15 policy. And let's say you have $100,000 of underinsured motorist or uninsured motorist insurance. You have to exhaust that whole 15. So if the other insurance company doesn't want to pay out the 15, you can't use your insurance yet until they've exhausted that. And I talked about a case that we had a few years ago now. Been quite a few years now. I feel like yesterday, where we had a trial, and again, the guy had a 15 policy, but they were trying to put 50% fault onto our client, he wasn't. He wasn't. We felt he was 0% at fault. This person made an illegal turn motion in front of our client, causing great injury, and he had. I want to say it was about $50,000 in medical damages on top, and that's before pain and suffering.
My goodness.
So we couldn't get to his. So that was an easy case for us to try, because you're offering us $7,500 for a guy with $50,000 in bills.
Wow.
You're forcing us to take this to trial, and I'll take those to trial all day long, because once we get to that 15, we know there's another almost $100,000 that we can get to.
Amazing.
So when we got to trial and we started, finally it started clicking, and what the insurance companies don't like is risk. And when they realized, hey, we were asking for a lot of money, they just felt it was cheaper to give us the extra $7,500. And that's a big win for our client. And he would have never gotten that just protecting his own. So,
amazing.
And again, that's the kind of case too. If he only had a 15 policy, would it have been worth to go to trial over $7,500 when it cost you $7,500 just to go to trial? Because he insured himself, that made it easy for us to go to trial. That's an easy decision. But when people don't insure themselves, you have to look at the cost of what it's going to cost, and what can you get. So, and those are the things that people don't understand until you try to explain it to them and show them the numbers.
Wow. So Josh, can you explain why policy limits matter so much, and how they can kind of cap what an injured person can realistically recover?
Well, obviously, policy limits matter because, obviously, we'll start with the easy one for yourself. If you have $100,000 of insurance that you're paying for yourself, obviously that's the most you can get. So that's easy. But the policy limits for the other person matter, because that's the most you can get from them. In the example I just gave you about the guy with a 15 policy. So you have to exhaust those limits first. So that's why it can be tricky. So even if it's, let's say it was $50,000 and you still have $100,000, you still have to get to that 50. That can matter. The other thing is too, and there are examples, and that may be a topic for another day, but you can forego the insurance and go after them for their personal assets. But the problem is the biggest problem is 99% of the time somebody with no insurance or a minimal policy has no assets.
Right.
That's just 99% of them are out there are like that. And I have so many cases. When we have good investigators who go out and are very good at finding assets, you might find somebody who has something somewhere, but nothing worth. They don't own houses, and then that's most people's biggest asset is their houses.
Right.
And then of course there are objects, there are things you can't you can't take from people like social security. So that's why limits on the other party can be important, because that can limit what you can get from them. And obviously the policy limits for yourself. That's the most you can get for yourself.
So why is certain evidence like medical bills, police reports, witness statements so important in kind of proving the uninsured or the underinsured motorist claim?
Well, because just like any other case, you still have to prove your case just like any other case. You have to prove fault by preponderance of the evidence. And then you have to prove your bills as well. And they have to be reasonable and necessary. People forget about that part. Reasonable and necessary. The bills have to be reasonable and necessary as a direct result, approximate cause of the crash. Sometimes people go a little crazy. It's and sometimes there's treatment that the insurance companies try to disregard. But whether it's a fully insured person or whether it's an uninsured person, you still have to make those the proof and the standard of proof is still the same as in any other case. It's just that's the difference is in underinsured and uninsured motorists is how we recover or where we recover it from.
So what are the common ways insurance companies fight these claims, and how can clients be ready for that when it happens?
Oh, just the example I gave earlier is a prime example of just we'll put 50% liability on on my client on you, the injured, the aggrieved will put 50% liability on you. So now we only have to pay you $7,500 instead of the full 15, and that's one of the biggest things. And it's amazing sometimes how much they grasp at straws to put fault on the person who's injured. So that's one tactic for sure. And let's see. And another tactic, a lot of times what they'll do instead of maybe putting fault is just denying liability till the very end, or waiting, drawing it out, or denying medical bills. Like I said, reasonable and necessary, they'll say. And I always love it too when they love it. I love the insurance companies love to say that the emergency room bill isn't reasonable or it isn't necessary, or they have to accept Medi-Cal, or they have to do this. And it's like, okay, you do exactly what the emergency rooms do. So you don't like the tactics that the insurance company that the emergency room insurance is doing, that you're doing to us. So I always find it ironic when the vehicle insurance company complains about the tactics of the emergency room insurance. You guys are doing the exact same thing, but now it's being done to you. So I always find that
right. Why they don't like it? They're like, wait a minute, now we can't. That's what we do. You can't do that.
Yeah, right. Yep. I always find that funny, and especially when dealing with adjusters and insurance companies from the auto industry, when they complain about that, it's like, well, that's what you guys do that to us. So I don't know what turnabout's fair play. I don't know why you're upset somebody else is doing it to you. It's the same rules.
So wrap things up though, for someone listening right now who's never looked closely at their auto policy, what's your best advice for making sure them and their family are fully protected?
I would say that the average uninsured or underinsured motorist case, the average person probably can't handle or wouldn't be able to handle or maximize their recovery by themselves, just because it is an area that most people don't deal with and don't fully understand. Most people don't understand the difference between uninsured motorist and underinsured. So if you don't even understand the very basics, how do you know you're getting the most that you can recover? So that's why having somebody to represent you, to to let you know that, hey, this is what you can get, or this is what the case is worth, or this is how you get to that, because you just can't file, like I said, you just can't file an uninsured motorist or an underinsured motorist claim. There is a process and there is a step to get in there. So, having an attorney who is used to these cases and has a lot of experience in these types of cases is the way to go, because even though your insurance company has to defend you, they have no duty to pay you the maximum.
Josh, sir, appreciate the information.
Yeah, it's definitely one area that it continues to grow and grow and grow, because like I said, the more drivers that are out there, the more people who are uninsured, and those numbers just and like I've seen just a steady increase the last 10 years, and I don't see anything suggesting that those numbers are going to slow down.
It's incredible stuff. Thank you all for listening to today's episode of The Moody Lawyer. If you've been injured in an accident and you're worried that the driver doesn't have enough coverage, visit moodylawyer.com and schedule that free case evaluation and consultation. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a review so people can get this information that they need and share it with someone else if they find this information helpful. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.